gravação, teste.
Let me come. Okay,
The first moment.
down. I'm sorry, Patricia. I did something to your body.
Não. O ideal é que ele apareça lá.
É uma breve... Mas eu não vou falar nada agora, tá?
Mas é isso.
Eu acho que a gente já pode sentar, você só fala aqui. Já está sentado. Ah, então. Não. Pode deixar. Melhor ainda. Eu faço.
As intérpretes têm alguma dúvida?
Depois eu falo. Deixa. Melhor do que isso.
A gente vai falar e eu vou te Não, aí quando a gente estiver montando mesmo, ela, aí você fala pra mim o que você tá? Chama alguém pra ficar aqui com você nesse primeiro momento, se ela começar a falar, entendeu?
Bom, boa tarde a todas, a todos. Agradecemos a presença de vocês, muitas pessoas queridas que constroem essa luta permanente com a gente, rostos desconhecidos, o que é muito melhor, né? Que garante a renovação. A gente vai fazer, com a presença da nossa querida professora Patricia Hill Collins, um presente para todos nós. A gente está marcando 15 anos de fundação do NIREMA, que é o Núcleo Interdisciplinar de Reflexão e Memória Afrodescendente aqui da PUC. A gente vai falar rapidinho sobre o núcleo, tem um vídeo, né, que mostra um pouco, pelos coordenadores e coordenadoras antigas, um pouco essa construção do núcleo, um pouco o que o núcleo fez nos últimos anos, e depois, em seguida, a gente vai para a Patrícia, só para o pessoal não ficar, eu vim para o evento errado. Tá bom? Eu vou passar a palavra para o Padre Álvaro, que é o nosso vice-reitor. Muito obrigada pela presença de todos. Muito obrigada.
Boa tarde. Pode dizer boa tarde, gente. Boa tarde. Ai, que bom a gente se acolher, né, nessa tarde. E é uma alegria realmente celebrar esses 15 anos do Nirema. O padre Josafá, que devia estar aqui, que queria estar aqui, mas ele estava impedido por um outro compromisso, né? E eu viria de qualquer forma, então ele me pediu para que eu, aproveitando que, né, que já estaria aqui, o representasse para dar as boas-vindas a cada um, a cada uma, agradecer a presença de todos, né? Claro, agradecer a presença da professora Patrícia aqui, e foi um prazer conhecer a professora Tula, primeira vez que a gente se encontra. Luiz Roberto, a gente já se encontrou outras vezes. Eu tenho assim uma alegria grande também de estar aqui hoje, porque nós vivemos, né, dentro de um mundo, e esse mundo muitas vezes é um mundo mau, é um mundo que nos faz mal e é um mundo que nos faz fazer mal. E eu acho que quando nós falamos da questão afrodescendente, é preciso entender bem isso, não é? Quer dizer que a realidade, o ambiente onde nós vivemos, é uma espécie de atmosfera e todos nós a respiramos, né? Ou é uma água que todos nós bebemos, ou é um alimento que todos nós comemos. E isso influencia cada um de nós. Então, se há aspectos desse alimento, dessa atmosfera, dessa água que estão envenenados, nós todos ficamos envenenados. E nós todos podemos agir mal. Então, eu acho que há uma luta grande realmente, né, para que nós encontremos um ambiente, uma sociedade, um mundo mais saudáveis nesse sentido da promoção dos direitos humanos, né, e da igualdade entre nós. Aliás, uma coisa que outro dia eu escutei que me deu muita luz, né? Todos nós somos diferentes e a diferença é um fato, e a diferença é que é bela. Agora, igualdade é direito. Diferença é fato, igualdade é direito. A diferença é um fato para ser acolhido e valorizado. A igualdade é um direito para ser buscado na luta e nos braços dados de todos nós. E eu acho que esse núcleo dentro da PUC é um testemunho dessa luta comum da universidade. Então, agradeço mais uma vez, né, a todos que trabalham nesse núcleo e parabéns por esses 15 anos. Vamos celebrá-lo com muita dignidade hoje. Obrigado.
Os afrodescendentes da universidade. Foi uma afirmativa que nós fizemos no IREMA. Então, hoje é um prazer estar comemorando 15 anos de um núcleo que deu certo. É uma alegria para mim poder participar, mesmo que à distância, aqui da Catalunha.
A gente optou por fazer o vídeo para que boa parte dos coordenadores pudesse falar. Faltou aqui só a professora Regiane Matos, que foi coordenadora do núcleo também, que a gente não conseguiu estar fora e a gente não conseguiu que ela mandasse para a gente, né, a sua participação. E para garantir que a gente, né, conseguisse contar essa história em pouco tempo. E a gente passa a palavra agora ao professor Luiz Roberto, que depois da iniciativa da professora Gisele, tem mantido no âmbito do Centro de Ciências Sociais a nossa existência e a possibilidade de continuidade dos nossos trabalhos.
Obrigado, Tula. Bom, eu acho que vocês já viram a história do Ninema, acho que uma boa parte dos presentes aqui participam dessa história desde o início. Não é, o Centro de Ciências Sociais, não é, ele abriga o NIREMA porque os departamentos mais envolvidos estão no centro, mas, na verdade, ele é um projeto da universidade. Eu gostaria só, não acho que o importante é a palestra do professor Nicolas, mas eu gostaria só de aproveitar esse momento, não é, para marcar uma posição importante da universidade. Né? A PUC do Rio, quando eu fui aluno nos anos 60, era uma universidade de elite branca da Zona Sul do Rio de Janeiro. A PUC do Rio, há muitos anos, e o NIREMA é uma das facetas, não é, dessa mudança necessária e importante na nossa história. A PUC do Rio hoje é uma instituição absolutamente, não é, integrada, não é, nos movimentos da sociedade, nas diferenças da sociedade. É uma instituição que, de fato, busca dar um exemplo em relação, não é, às instituições de ensino comunitárias no Brasil. E apenas porque, não é, e eu sempre digo que o Espírito Santo nos protege. Não é? Nós temos passado e passamos, como qualquer instituição na sociedade dividida e muito aguerrida, não é, hoje no Brasil, por problemas que envolvem, inclusive, não é, questões raciais. Mas foi muito importante, não é, muito importante que este evento hoje não é, esteja aqui mostrando, não é, a vocês que já conhecem mais o nosso papel, como foi muito importante também, e foi citado pelo professor Pá, nós tivemos, aliás, o padre Álvaro, que está começando como vice-reitor da universidade, agora tem cerca de um mês, não é, mas já tinha sido aluno nosso no mestrado de filosofia, nós tivemos lá na Baixada, que é um projeto que é muito caro a esta universidade. Eu, pessoalmente, tenho um papel muito importante, que eu briguei por esse projeto da Baixada desde o início, ele está fazendo 18 anos. Não é? E foi muito bom, porque nesse dia lá no projeto da Baixada, no sábado, com uma belíssima mesa para falar sobre violência e poder afetando as comunidades não é, da Baixada e comunidades, nós tivemos depoimentos maravilhosos, não é, de ex-alunos nossos da Baixada, não é, mostrando o nosso papel. Isso para nós foi um momento muito importante. Aliás, na semana que vem nós vamos ter uma reunião de diretores onde isso vai ser mostrado, pequenas coisas. Porque, efetivamente, a gente sabe, não é, que problemas existem, mas podem ter certeza, e sei que todos que estão aqui presentes sabem disso, não é? A PUC jamais deixará que qualquer tipo de problema de agressão em relação à raça ou qualquer coisa seja, de fato, alguma coisa que manche, não é, o papel da universidade. E eu queria, só para fechar, fazer uma referência especial ao Departamento de Ciências Sociais. O Departamento de Ciências Sociais, não é, dos quais a professora Ângela, aqui presente, e a professora Sônia, não é, foram precursoras do NIREMA, é um departamento que vem trabalhando sempre com essa questão da inclusão, com a questão da diversidade, é um departamento que dá um exemplo ao Brasil, não é, do seu trabalho. E a professora Ângela é uma pessoa a quem nós devemos todo o respeito, não é, pelo seu papel pioneiro e pela luta, não é, em relação à questão das cotas e os estudos. Então, desculpem um pouco dessa, um pouco afirmativo, mas acho que como, de fato, as questões devem ser claramente colocadas e afirmadas, é só para deixar claro, né, que este é mais um exemplo dos muitos que essa instituição, com seus bolsistas, com apoio aos vestibulares comunitários, com apoio de todas as formas, com recurso, tudo isso vem procurando sempre atuar nessa direção, que é a direção correta. Eu fico muito feliz, não é, com quase 50 anos de formado e de PUC, não é, de participar hoje de uma instituição que é muito diferente daquela instituição onde eu estudei. E isso é a nossa marca, a nossa questão e a nossa força, e eu sei que vocês estão juntos conosco nisso. Então, agradeço a presença de todos, não, acho que vocês terão aqui, o que é importante agora, a palestra da professora Nichols, mas realmente eu não podia deixar de fazer, não é, essa referência nesse momento. Tá? Muito obrigado.
Antes de desfazer a mesa, a gente queria só chamar a Elisa Larkin, que que faz aniversário junto com o núcleo e que o IPAfro teve uma participação muito importante, né, tanto no momento de fundação quanto em várias atividades posteriores, para falar um pouquinho para a gente.
Muito obrigada. Olha, é um grande prazer estar aqui mais uma vez no aniversário do NIREMA. Eu quero cumprimentar todas e todos que se juntaram nesse esforço de criação do NIREMA e testemunhar o fato de o IPAfro, o Instituto de Pesquisas e Estudos Afro-Brasileiros, que eu tive a honra de ajudar meu marido Abdias Nascimento a fundar em 1981, veio testemunhando a presença na PUC, né, de um protagonismo negro bem antes do NIREMA, na pessoa da professora Lélia Gonzalez, do Departamento de Ciência e Política. E testemunhar também o fato de a PUC, no momento, em 2004, quando Abdias Nascimento fazia 90 anos, nós tivemos a honra de apresentar uma exposição aqui, ocupando todos os espaços do Salão Grandjean de Montigny, Solar Grandjean de Montigny, e essa exposição mais tarde ocupou todos os espaços do Arquivo Nacional, a antiga Casa da Moeda, e foi para Salvador e para Brasília também, contando não apenas a história de Abdias, mas a história do movimento negro no Brasil. E aqui eu gostaria só de fechar saudando ao próprio movimento que, assim como o IPAfro é a criação do movimento negro brasileiro, também me parece que o NIREMA, mesmo que indiretamente, seja um produto, um resultado da luta dos próprios negros do Brasil. E voltando ao nosso tema do aniversário, eu quero oferecer um presente para vocês, que é o poeta Milson Santos, que está aqui conosco, que é do IPAfro, e nós estamos convidando para trazer aqui um pequeno presente para os presentes.
É muita responsabilidade, né? Mas vamos lá, foi a Lisa que fez isso, não tem nada a ver com isso não. O que aconteceu aqui é a responsabilidade dela, viu? Então, Tula Pires, eu quero, antes de tudo, né? Eu quero ela. Isso. Então, eu queria dedicar umas palavras a você e em seu nome dedicar às irmãs que estão na casa. Depois eu vou fazer um outro poema para geral. As infinitas chibatadas e suas marcas não me amedrontaram. Os estupros sofridos e a normalização deles não lhe afrouxaram. Assim a carrasca que lhe cuspiu na cara, que lhe pisou, que lhe invejou, não lhe tirou o brilho nem o calor. Enterrar seus filhos aos gritos, laçados os meninos os tiros, nada disso lhe desesperançou. O tempo passou, você conheceu o livro e o livro lhe armou. Da graduação para o mestrado, para o doutorado, para o pós-doutorado, para onde bem quiser, você salta, já saltou, e hoje, para acessá-la com êxito, tem que usar, antes de tudo, com sua licença e por favor, sujeito assim ou não, do maior valor. Olha só que nega mais ousada! Olha só que nega mais ousada. O pensamento racista pensou, mas não teve coragem de externar seu pavor. Ele fica ali se repetindo no deleite pessoal do racista tradicional. Quanto escapole pensar nos dias atuais, pega mal. Ele passa mal. Por isso ele também mudou. Ele também avançou, mas jamais lhe confunde. Não mais lhe engana, tula. É que você é a preta flor. Bem, eu vou continuar enrolando vocês na conversa com um poema aqui, que é um poema que eu mais gosto atualmente, mas é veinho e, no mesmo tempo, ele é muito, muito pertinente, então vale a pena fazer ele aqui, que eu acho que tem tudo a ver. Boca preta, mais uma dividida, marcado na entrada, marcado na saída, cercado, o campo tá minado, o cara mal nasceu e já tem que estar preparado para tudo. Lenhado, endividado, desde sempre coagido a sentir-se derrotado, guri com cara de adulto, mais um maloqueiro criado pelo mundo. Lenhado, criança esperança, futuro do país, boleiro ponta de lança, dentro de casa tudo contrariava, era um pai que só bebia, uma mãe que só fumava, lição de moral nesse caso é impossível, aí Boca Preta diz, não faço o que eu faço? Faço o que eu digo? Aí já viu, deu de fumar na lata e ficava mais na merda quando a lombra passava, dependente. Mal foi matriculado na escola do mundão, onde quem tá certo, tá errado. 15 anos, a dele era meter sexo na chapa. Vai se fuder. DST, sua marca juvenil, cancro mole, HPV, gonorreia. Aí já viu. Tô perdido, preciso me encontrar, tô sentindo um vazio. Algo quer me sufocar. Tá por fora a vida que eu tô levando, pareço um brinquedo, mas quem é que tá brincando? Ei, você quer o quê? Parou de travação, mas e a vida? Escorre. Cadê transformação? Anos passaram, já tô com 23, que zorra é essa? Onde foi que eu errei? Optou pelo caminho mais duro, deu de correr atrás já na fase de adulto. Emprego não rola sem experiência, e para não dizer que é negro, sem boa aparência. Tô perdido, preciso sair disso. Ser um cara decente, um cara de compromisso. Nunca é tarde, mas você tá atrasado, perdeu tempo demais na pilha de atrasalado. O seu saci cavou seu buraco. Você tá cercado de tudo quanto é lado. Sabe de uma? Não vai ficar de graça. Vou portar uma quadrada e fazer nome na praça, dirige o carro. Você é meu refém, se procurar gracinha, seu doutor, te corta em 100. Cash é dinheiro no caixa eletrônico, vamos logo com a senha, porque eu já tô no pânico. Eu vou, retire a grana, agora sai fora, vou poupar a sua vida e curtir até umas horas. Aqui tá bom, a pista tá escura. Foi só ele soltar e colou uma viatura. Mãos ao alto. Baculejaram o cara, acharam a pacoteira com a grana quadrada, 1.000, 2.000, 2.500, 2.600, a gente racha as notas e dá fim no elemento. Ó, feito um gato, Boca Preta deu pinote, se malocou dentro do mato, escapando por muita sorte. Dormiu na mata, voltou todo lapeado e ficou dentro de casa uns meses, intocado. Depois, assustado e com muita determinação, abandonou as drogas, deu sequência na função, voltou a estudar, botou a cara devagar, concluiu o 2º grau, passou no vestibular, seu pai morreu, sua mãe parou de fumar. Foi preciso 18 anos para fazer o jogo virar e hoje, PUC, Boca Preta é um grande espelho lá na comunidade e ganha vida ensinando história numa faculdade. Boca Preta venceu na dividida, marcado na entrada, marcado na saída. Viva!
Obrigada, Padre Álvaro, obrigada, Luiz Roberto, obrigada, meu irmão, por ter dado tom para a continuidade de nossa conversa. Queria agradecer primeiro, enquanto convido Patricia para sentar junto com a gente e Ângela para a mesa com a gente. Enquanto elas chegam à mesa, queria agradecer muito a Carmen Petit e ao Carlinhos do TV PUC por ter, em cima da hora, juntado forças para que a gente pudesse fazer esse registro mais rápido, né, sobre esse tempo do Nirema, para a gente poder aproveitar bastante a presença da Patrícia aqui. Queria agradecer também a presença de muita gente de dentro e de fora da PUC, né? A gente tem não só representação aqui do CCS, mas do decanato do CTCA também com a Cristina, coordenação central de graduação com a professora Daniela Vargas, os diretores do Departamento de Direito, Francisco Guimarães, meu companheiro de muitos anos, o Ricardo Ismael, diretor do Departamento de Ciências Sociais, e muitas professoras e professores, né, do Direito, das Ciências Sociais, Comunicação, Relações Internacionais. Se eu estou esquecendo alguém...
Queria registrar também a presença do Victor Tan, que foi no consulado, foi o testemunho ocular da criação do NIREMA, junto com o cônsul na época, Anthony Fisher, que foi um grande incentivador, e o adido político, que é um sociólogo, admirador da Patrícia, né, Jonathan, que está aqui conosco.
Queria agradecer a todo mundo e vou usar a Fernanda e Giovana como as duas de fora da PUC, em nome de quem eu agradeço a presença de todas as outras irmãs e irmãos que estão aqui presentes nessa noite de hoje. E como eu não estou vendo muitos dos orientandos e orientandas, vai em nome do Luiz. Um beijo para toda a família. Cecília está ali também. A família é grande, a gente aquilomba desde o início. E não podia deixar de falar também de Carmen Luz, nossa querida mais velha, bailarina como nós. Carmen Luz, bailarina como nós. E queria passar... Ângela, quer falar alguma coisa antes? Queria passar a fala logo para a Patrícia, que é o que está todo mundo aqui esperando, né? E agradecer muitíssimo essas 2 semanas com a gente, a generosidade, a troca, o afeto, o quanto que a diáspora nos constitui e o quanto que a gente se fortalece e aprende sempre que a gente tem a possibilidade de estreitar a presença, estreitar as experiências e estreitar as nossas esperanças, né? Então, com vocês, Patrícia Rio Cornos.
Oi. That's it. You can now turn on your translation, right? This has been a wonderful visit here. I see friendly faces. I see students, which makes me very happy, because once people have been students with you, they're not obligated to come back. If it didn't go well, they'd probably say, oh no, I can't listen to her for another minute. So I'm happy to see you here. I've made some new friends, colleagues. It's just been a wonderful week and a half. But I'm also here today to give a very hard-hitting talk. I'm not here to be nice. I'm not here to celebrate. I will be talking about the United States. But if you see parallels between the United States and Brazil or other places, feel free to make them, right? We will have a discussion period afterward, and that would be a really good time for you to raise questions, comments, observations. I take this work very, very seriously. These are serious times. And because these are serious times, we need new analyses, not only of the times themselves, but what we might consider doing about them. Just a little bit of context. I'll be talking about intersectionality a little bit, not a huge amount, but enough. Intersectionality emerged during a very important political moment in the 1960s, the 1970s, and the 1980s. It emerged during a period of time when social movements around race and class and gender and sexuality and anti-colonialism were struggling around those particular axes of experience. And what was exciting about intersectionality was the growing recognition that while there were differences, it was one struggle in some ways. This is a very powerful idea around people getting together who have been separated for some time and who don't necessarily see their interests as necessarily aligned with one another. When I said these are new times, these are times when ideas like intersectionality become claimed, hollowed out, changed, and no longer speak to those realities that created them. So we have to be very careful not to mistake cosmetic inclusion for actual transformation. I think that occurs in many different places. So I will be talking about intersectionality, which gained a foothold in the academy after much struggle. It was not welcome when it arrived because the people who advanced those ideas were not the people who were welcome. Their ideas might have been welcomed, but the people themselves were more suspect. I mean, why should we listen to women? They're just too emotional. They can't think. Why should we listen to Black people? What did their culture ever do? Well, maybe there's some good ideas there that we can use, but the actual Black people themselves with the ideas, we want to think about that. So here we are at a moment of change, of profound global change. And I'm coming from a country that is undergoing, I think, cataclysmic change, but maybe not. Maybe what we're actually seeing in the United States is the other side of something that is quite old and that has been there for a very long time. Are you all still there? Okay. Let me know if I have to go home early because it's too much, all right? But I have come with a PowerPoint that speaks to my current work. I usually bring work in progress. And what I'm trying to think about now is not just the organization of social injustice or the organization of power. We have a lot of analysis about oppression. I used to teach this in my sociology class. I taught a class on the sociology of race and racial oppression. And by the time I got to the end of that class, my students knew everything about oppression. They knew about political structures. They knew about ideological structures. They knew about economic structures. They knew about macro levels of racism. They knew about micro racial aggressions. I was really good, all right? But then they said, Dr. Collins, we're so depressed. We now feel worse than when we came into your class because now we know how bad it is. What shall we do? And all I could say was, oh, my bad. We ran out of time, all right? So clearly that is an inadequate response to what we're dealing with. So what I have been looking at increasingly, because I'm a social theorist, is how do we theorize and analyze the moment that we're in vis-a-vis political issues, political responses. And that's what I'd like to share with you today, some of that work. All right? Now, I'm going to warn you, this is going to hurt your head, perhaps, right? I'm bringing you difficult things. I'm not necessarily going to hold your hand and say, oh, you're going to feel so good at the end of this. I don't know what you'll feel, because I think it's really important to say certain things and to say them now. So shall we say them? Thank you. That was the right answer. The right answer was yes. All right. My presentation is in 3 parts. For the first part of my presentation, I'm going to be talking about what I'm calling a fundamental contradiction. I'm going to argue you cannot have democracy when you have inequality. You can talk about having it. You can pretend it's all fair. You can pretend that we all participate equally and we all have a decision and a stake in democracy, whether we're talking democratic institutions in a college or in a country. I'll be talking about a country. When you have something called unequal citizenship, people have formal equality, they're all citizens, but they're far from equal. I'm going to argue that that's a fundamental contradiction in the United States from its founding. And I can't go back to the founding, I won't have enough time. But I want you to just work with that assumption with me, right? If you, in fact, disagree. Now, to address that particular fundamental contradiction around democracy and citizenship, I think intersectionality has some tools to offer. I think it has a framework that can help us think about these issues and those of us who are most affected by these issues. So for part 2 of my presentation, I'll be talking a bit about how this idea of intersectionality, while it is very good for analyzing oppression, might also provide some important tools for political action. And I'll be looking at political solidarity. This is a term everybody wants to have. I'm in solidarity with this group. I'm in solidarity with the indigenous folk. I'm in solidarity with, we use it loosely. Well, I don't believe in using terms loosely. I spend a lot of time thinking about what they mean. And for the third part of my presentation, I want to drill down into my argument and talk about 3 specific strategies that might come from thinking about the world differently, thinking about democracy and inequality differently. And those strategies are associated with coalition building and something that I'm going to call building durable political communities. Okay? So that's a lot on the plate. But didn't I hear that PUC is really full of smart people? Did I hear that? Listen. Okay, I had to wait for the translation. Now, if you take too long with the translation, I'm going to have to take the idea back, because it means that, are we really smart? I'm not sure. I mean, too much thinking. I will talk about you if you are not careful, all right? Just so you know. All right. Navigating the contradiction, post-raciality, and colorblind racism. Here's what's happened in the US. You know that the US has had a whole history of color-conscious racism. Well, everybody has. It's impossible to have racism without being aware of people who are of different color. However, I know Brazil has had a long history of racial democracy where all these people, for somehow, did not know they had color. All right, I don't know how that works. I can guess, all right? And others said, ooh, if we don't say anything about it, it's not real. It's just a discourse. We didn't have that in the US. We had overt segregation, right? And I'm using, by the way, race, because I'm going to argue that for the US, this is such a powerful idea that it is impossible to think about those other categories without somehow dealing with race. So if we deal with racism, we really have made a very healthy start in talking about sexism, class exploitation, other systems of power. But here's what I want to say about navigating this contradiction. Basically, the period that we're coming out of in the US is the period of Martin Luther King. I have a dream that one day my children can see over the mountaintop. I don't know exactly what he said there, but you've heard this, right? But Martin Luther King Jr.'s ideal of a colorblind society is really a very powerful ideal. But we have to be careful not to conflate the ideal with the reality. We have people who think we've already reached the mountaintop. We have people who think that if you pass laws that say, do not discriminate, discrimination went away. Now, many of you, for example, you know that there are speed limits, right? I'm assuming that on the streets of Rio, there are speed limits about how fast you should or should not go. All of you drive too fast, right? So to me, clearly, because you have a rule does not mean that is the reality. Clearly, because you have an aspiration, social justice, does not mean you have achieved it. And yet, large numbers of people want to believe in that ideal so much that they argue, or argued, that the United States is post-racial. And by using that term, post, it's another posting. Postmodernism, post-colonialism, post-structuralism, post-feminism, all of those, meaning we're beyond that. We had a movement. We established all these institutions. We can see inclusion, but that doesn't necessarily mean power has been shared. So, post-raciality, a belief in the social ideal of a colorblind society, which is a very good ideal. Being colorblind seemingly eliminates racism. So in other words, if I don't see color, there is no more racism. That's colorblind. Now, a lot of you may like that. That makes you comfortable. That makes you not a racist. That makes you whatever it is that you're trying to avoid. The thinking here is that individual prejudice and discrimination is what causes racism. And if you stop people from seeing color, racism goes away. Now, that's just a lovely thought. But post-raciality does not mean post-racism at all. It actually can be a new form of racism. But here's the problem of how this plays out in the US and perhaps other places. You have the visibility of race in a multicultural democracy. You can see who the Black people are, who the Latinos are. You can see who the Asian people are. You can see often who Muslims are by how women decide to dress. It's visible. It's right there. It's in your face. And yet, we lack a language to analyze contemporary racism. Now, I think that's what's happened over the last several years, particularly since the election of Barack Obama, right? Barack Obama was the icing. He was the candle on the cake. We don't have to look at racism anymore. Why? We have a Black president. That's the symbolism attached to that. Now, where are we now? Because you know we had an election, right? Everybody know that? Okay. It was a legal election. Ooh. Sorry about that. I don't know where that came from. That was totally inappropriate and unprofessional. I take it back. But basically what I'm arguing here is that we've always had white supremacy. The country really has had white supremacy since its inception. It's okay to say that. That doesn't mean I created racism by talking about it. All right? I'm actually analyzing it. If it makes people uncomfortable, it just does. You have to move on from that. Translators, how am I doing? I speed it up. We doing okay? Okay. Thank you. All right. And I think when you encounter white supremacy that occurs during a period of time when there's been a vacuum in anti-racist discourse, anti-racist analysis, anti-sexist analysis, very similar process with gender neutrality, women have arrived, same kind of thinking. What happens is you do not have a discourse to talk about what's really in front of you. You're caught off guard. You're caught flat-footed. So basically, what we have now, on the left, you see a graphic, and that is the changing of the guard, right? And the guard has definitely changed. That would be the presidency has shifted. And normally the presidency shifting is just sort of a nuance in a lot of ways. But this is a very significant shift. So I'm going to argue that what we have now is something called ultranationalism. In the US, it's called the alt-right. Some people call it white nationalism, but I think it's bigger than just race. I'm talking about race right now, but I think it's bigger than that. And it's a coded language for white racism and white supremacy. Now, all of this stuff at the bottom, I'm just not going to go through because in the interest of time. But I did pull up a graphic of a march in Charlottesville, Virginia last summer, 2017, that was very significant, where the white nationalists walked through a college town. And by the way, this thinking, they're going after colleges and students and faculty members as being too liberal or whatever. But notice they carried the American flag and they carried the Confederate flag. Now, the Confederacy is the side that actually lost the Civil War. That was the pro-slavery side, right? Even though no one wants to perhaps claim it that way. So what we have now is really the resurgence of a form of thinking that has always been there. It's not like the whole country is this way, but this is a very important root. So to me, the moment is very interesting, because what is happening at this particular moment with this ultranationalism is this is an administration that has explicitly and over time targeted multiple groups that historically perhaps were not attending to each other. This is a moment for a potential wake-up call or a turning point in America. For example, Black people, depends on where you start the argument, state violence, and BLM is the Black Lives Matter movement, all right? This would be African Americans who said, this old issue of state violence targeted against us and our youth, we need to do something about that. The next bullet, the Latinos, you might have heard, this is immigration policy. It's within the coded language of immigration, but it really means immigrants of color immigration. If we had a group of, let's pick Scandinavia. I love Scandinavia. Swedish migration, all right? The Norwegians all said, we must flee our country because it's so terrible. Not really going to happen, all right? And we want to get into the US. Do you think you'd be hearing policies like build the wall? Or do you think you'd be hearing policies like zero tolerance? I'll talk about that in a minute. All right. Women dismantle Planned Parenthood. That's an organization that provides reproductive services, sexual education, and that also provides health services, some of which are abortion. Many people are offended by all of that. And Planned Parenthood is still standing. Very interesting. Muslims, did you hear about the Muslim ban? The whole Muslims who couldn't travel into the country? And really the unfriendly climate that as I travel I encounter among students and visitors who think, I don't know if I can attend that conference in the US because I'm afraid I might not get a visa, and I'm afraid of what will happen when I go. The image is not really helping our institutions. Indigenous people, well, let's have the corporations build the oil pipeline across the sacred lands, all right? I can come back to that too. I'm going down a list. Are you seeing all the different groups that have been differentially harmed, okay? LGBTQ people, the notion of transgendered folks in the military and banning them, even though they have been there, all right? And Asian Americans, very interesting, because the effort is to dismantle affirmative action, which of course was helping those unworthy Black people and all those other people like them, using Asian Americans as the model minority who are now discriminated against. There is a court case now against Harvard University in terms of its admissions policies. So I list all of this very briefly because I'm sensing that perhaps not everybody has heard about all of this. But what I want to do is just lay out for you that multiple groups who have very different histories find themselves facing similar challenges right now. So where do we go with this? All right. Oh, sorry, I had to put this one in. You must forgive me. This has happened since I just got here, since I've been in Brazil. So this morning I had to sit down and say, family separation, is this a new low? All right. And what you see up on the, these are graphics of the separation of children from families who are trying to get into the US and are trying to seek asylum and sort of apply for that. And they're being told at the border, zero tolerance. You know, you're all illegal. And separating children. So I believe the US government now has over 2,000 children that it's sort of taken from families in the last few weeks. And so I pulled up a graphic. This is where the children are, right? It's one thing to think about hypothetical children. It's another thing to think about actual children. Here we have tent cities where the children are in fact living, right? Here we have children in dormitories on the floor covered with something or other. Here we have a small child. I don't want to really personalize this and, you know, and just sort of tug at your heartstrings, but I have grandchildren and one of them is almost 2 and this little girl is 2. So when I look at this picture, I think, oh, how horrible that would have been. How horrible that would have been for this baby. All right. I don't care how many social workers you bring in. This is just not right. So what will it take for people to see the connections? All right. So participatory democracy and social justice, where are we? Where we are is really looking at a threadbare national myth. And that is the myth of the American dream. A good one. It says, if you come, we welcome you, you work hard, it's meritorious. That's what it is. It's the dream. It's an ideal. It's an ideal of participatory democracy. But unfortunately, social injustices limit equal participation, and they reproduce social inequality. So I'm going to argue, or am arguing, that social justice, fundamental fairness, is required to achieve democratic ideals. It's not an extra add-on. It's fundamental, but it's often siphoned off to the side. So is this a turning point for US democracy? On the one side, I see categories of unequal citizenship. For youth and children, those kids are, you know, basically incarcerated. I don't know how to say it, you know, locking up little children, all right? Youth and children, Latinos and Latinas, immigrants of color, Muslims, Black people, Indigenous people, Asian Americans, LGBTQ people, women, disabled people, poor white people also, who are experiencing a drug crisis and cannot get health service. Now, are you beginning to wonder who are the real Americans? Aren't all of these groups the real Americans too? That's a lot of different groups up there. Now, intersectionality. Instead of thinking about these groups as separate and discrete, there are separate and discrete histories. We need an analysis that actually looks at how their histories intersect, how their histories shape one another, how the histories of indigenous people and women perhaps shape one another. How are they interconnected? And this may be the moment when facing individually or separately such challenges, this might be the time to begin to look to develop that kind of analysis. Now, intersectionality examines how capitalism, racism, heteropatriarchy, colonialism, and similar systems of power explain these group histories. And it provides a language to analyze both group histories and interconnections among groups. We can explain the history of African Americans with the language of intersectionality. How did racism affect men and women differently, for example? But it also provides a language to analyze the interconnections among these groups. You still with me? Okay, good. I thought I'd check. Okay. Because, occasionally I don't know. You could be like dozing off there, whatever. All right. So what I think where I'm trying to go with this is to look at what I would call the interdependent and intertwined histories of unequal citizenship. To begin to talk about these issues, not as, oh, the poor Latinos and they're so downtrodden. Oh, the poor women and the sexual harassment. But rather to train a much more sophisticated and analytical eye on these common experiences, but with these differences. So I see these histories as interdependent and intertwined. And I would frame them not as, not as identity politics, but as expressions of unequal citizenship. To me, to begin to talk about this in terms of what citizenship should mean and how to put teeth in what it should mean. This is about democracy, all right? It's not about special interests. It's about democracy. So I put up here a graphic. This is a book by a colleague of mine, Evelyn Nakano-Glenn, and the name of her book is Unequal Freedom. And basically what she does here is the kind of work that many of you might want to look toward or locate. She says the subtitle is How Race and Gender Shaped American Citizenship and Labor. Now, very often we hear intersectionality as race, class, and gender. Race, class, and gender is meaningless. This is actually a study, right? And there are many studies like this that take on these big questions. So Evelyn Glenn has taken on the question of how race and gender shaped American citizenship. That's the category of nation. And labor. That's one thing she's using as her surrogate for class. She looks at the relationship between blacks and whites in the South. So we go beyond it's just a black thing or a white thing. She looks at the connections between Mexicans and Anglos in the Southwest. Well, I guess it is a white thing. They're the white people again. Only now they're called Anglos. Okay, well, all right, let me take that back. All right, and she looks at Asians and Haoles, I don't know how to say that, in Hawaii, which is a very different history as well, a distinctive history. So work like this begins to move us in this direction that might help see the possibilities for this particular historic moment. That was part one. Did I kill anybody yet? You still out there? Yay! All right. So that was 400 years of American history and contemporary politics and intersectionality, all in one part. Can you handle it? Okay. Now I want to move on and talk about intersectionality and political solidarity. This is the book, just so you know, the graphic for the poor students I worked with last week. They've just had so much of me up to here, all right? But if you're looking for a book that gives a good introduction and overview to the complexity of intersectionality, I authored this book with Sirma Bilge, my co-author, who's quite terrific. And we actually have in our first chapter, FIFA soccer as a way to talk about intersectionality. So as not to be, you know, predictable. We did not start in feminism. We started in soccer. I said, that'll surprise them. All right. But anyhow, because you can take this framework and analyze a lot, right? But anyhow, in this part of the presentation, I now want to think about how this particular idea and set of ideas of intersectionality might shape a political solidarity. So I want to generalize now from those specifics of the first part. But first, I want to say why intersectionality and why now? Well, intersectionality now is increasingly depicted in the media as a narrow identity politics. It's just about me, my group. All I care about is my group. All I care about is my Black group or my women group. I don't care about these big issues of democracy, social justice, citizenship that are more common issues. I just care about myself. This is really not what this has been all along. It's actually a mischaracterization that, to me, strips the potential of the ideas themselves. This is not to say that everybody who is under this big tent of intersectionality, big tent umbrella of intersectionality, sees these nuances, right, that I'm making tonight. But I find it fascinating that, because I've been tracking this for quite some time. I mean, how is this term used? Where is it used? And it's exploded in the media in the last 2 to 3 years, joined with criticisms of identity politics. So it's a way of recasting people who are, we can talk about this later. But anyhow, this is why intersectionality, why now? It's increasingly depicted as the entity that creates the very social divisions that I introduced in part one. All right, that's the problem. All these people think of themselves as so separate. These Blacks and these Latinos and these children and these poor people, if they just thought of themselves as part of one American community, everything would be solved. Now, obviously, I'm saying not really. Let's see what we could do with this. I think instead that intersectionality offers a language that enables us to work with the social divisions that already exist, right? I think if we use it wisely, it gives us a language that enables us to work with social divisions of race, class, gender, sexuality, age, ability, and nation that already exist. So given that, how do I prove it? How do I think about that? How might intersectionality inform understandings of political solidarity? First, I think it's significant that what I mentioned earlier, so this is to recap a bit, building coalitions among groups that are differentially targeted. The groups that I've commented on in that first section, I could have cut into this differently, but those are the groups I'm bringing to you to think about. Building coalitions among groups that are differentially targeted within unequal citizenship requires recognizing these interdependent and independent, interdependent and intertwined struggles. We're at a moment where multiple groups can begin to say, wait a minute, you look completely different than me. You have a different history than me. And yet we're facing a common challenge. Our struggles resemble one another. That's what I'm saying. When you have moments like this, clarity can occur. How should we think about political solidarity that reflects the distinctive histories and angles of vision of these struggles? Now, here's what this means for real. It means, for example, if there has been a long-standing Black struggle, Afro-Brazilian struggle, African-American struggle, that does not mean that a coalition occurs by just saying, let's fold that into the real struggle. It does not mean, for example, choosing class and saying, but it's all really about class. And this Afro thing is a variation of class. I'm saying instead, this is really looking at balanced integrity and coalitions among groups who come to the table because they recognize they have something to contribute to each other and learn from one another. This is power sharing, right? This is not assimilation. This is not, we've tried that. That was Martin Luther King, all right? That was Barack Obama. He became president, all right? We need something new, at least in the US. I can't speak to Brazil. So how would we think about political solidarity that reflects the distinctive histories and angles of vision of these struggles? Well, okay. Do you need a quick summary of intersectionality? You do. The answer was supposed to be no, but all right. But just briefly, because I mean, the poor students who were with me all last week, they're probably going, yeah, all right. But very quickly, just so you know, this is how I would cut into it. First of all, it's a critical analysis of intersecting systems of power. It's critical, and it focuses on power. This is not identity. Intersectionality is not about identity. Identity is derivative of systems of power, but it's not about that. Intersectionality focuses on systems of power and how they mutually construct one another. There's a whole language that has been used to describe this. I've used the term matrix of domination, interlocking systems of oppression, people will say. But it's the recognition that there's no such thing as just sexism by itself. It's always tied and structured by these other systems. A second main idea is that it incorporates a critical explanation of how social inequalities are relational, how they are organized, endure, change, and resisted. So from my perspective, intersectionality is about not some grand social inequality, but would cut into social inequalities around a particular issue. Take, for example, the issue of reproductive rights or reproductive freedom. Women and men do have different bodies. Women, I'm just going to let you know, I mean, I know we want to construct this all away, but women's issues around reproduction are very central to their lives. Whether to have babies, how many babies to have, can they keep their babies, can they care for their babies? And you could say that's a woman's issue, which it is. But not all women relate to that issue in the same way. It matters if you're a Black woman or a Latina woman, or it really matters if you're poor in terms of what is offered to you and how people feel they have access to your body and the decisions that are made for you around your reproduction. So you can take something that may appear to be a social problem that is universal. But when you look at the social inequalities and how they need to be explained by these categories. So it's a critical explanation of how they are organized, endure change, and resisted. And finally, this is a piece that I would definitely, now that I've been here 2 weeks, add in a lot more. Intersectionality is inquiry and action that is informed by ethical principles. There's an ethical core here. It isn't just a theory of truth. It isn't just knowledge for knowledge's sake. Instead, social justice, democracy, and fairness lie at its heart. I feel like I'm trying to teach you everything I know in 10 minutes. So far, so good, all right? You're looking like you're still upright. This is good. And you people on the floor, I feel your pain. Just so you know, who do not have chairs, are there people over there on the floor? Raise your hands, the poor people on the floor. See, they're so pitiful, they can't even raise their hands. Look at you. There's one down there. All right. Thank you so much for sitting on the floor, because I know how hard the floor can be. All right. I mean, they didn't even get a chair. I thought PUC-Rio had furniture. I thought this was an affluent school I was coming to. All right. I won't put that in my report. All right. But I want to talk about something because, a lot of my work comes from Black women's experiences. This is my area of expertise. I've studied African American women. I have studied African American women's thinking, thought, epistemology, history, actions, analysis. I don't believe that the route to the universal is to start with what's been called universal. I think you can start with the particularities of this group and many other groups and see where you meet up. That's how I work, right? So when it comes to political solidarity, I'm going to look to the situation of Black women. Now, for many of you, you may think of Black women as through these stereotypical lenses, and there are lots of them. I don't see Black women as downtrodden. I don't see Black women as powerless. I don't see Black women as victims. I certainly think there are some, in fact, many, far too many Black women who are victimized, but I don't necessarily see that as the essence of Black womanhood. I see Black women as actually being quite powerful and quite central to political struggles, starting from slavery to now. So I see Black women as the backbone of communities, and not just cooking and cleaning and being in the background, but holding things together when things get tough. So for example, this week I met a woman, an activist, who works on behalf of mothers, these are Black mothers, mothers of incarcerated and murdered children. Now, how would you feel if somebody murdered your child? Could you walk away from that? That's fundamentally at the heart of Black feminism and Black women's activism. It's the preservation of Black life, something I call precarious Black life. One's own life, or the life of one's children, or the life of one's community. But this does not mean that all Black women are heroic, or that one must have a mother like that in order to be heroic. It means that this is woven into the very fabric of African American politics. And women are not peripheral to that politics, they're central. But that doesn't mean that those politics have always been equal, right? So I think what you see with African American women is something called flexible solidarity. And this is knowing, always being in solidarity, but being flexible around the strategies that are used for a particular political project. Sometimes Black women know that it's important to send the men, right? They don't have to go. to the meeting, to whatever. Other times, Black women are the meeting. So a lot of this is being strategic and thinking about solidarity, not just as we all engage in groupthink, but we calibrate our actions and our analyses to the challenges at hand, recognizing that Black women work with Black people across differences of gender, social class, sexuality, ethnicity, and age. Do we all know that not all Black people are the same? Do we know this? Because when you're in white institutions, it's like one Black person is just as good as another. You know, there's this constant misrecognition. This used to occur to me in my school. People didn't know they thought I was the other Black woman because they only had two, all right? Which Black woman are you? Oh, wait a minute, you're Patricia. Hello, kind of thing. I'm the short one who doesn't look like the tall one. I'm the one who, yeah, all of that. All right. So what we have here is this heterogeneity within African-American communities and solidarity that's designed to build durable political communities. This is a long struggle. This is not an episodic struggle. A long one, the very survival of people is at stake here, has meant dealing with heterogeneity in a flexible fashion. In African-American communities, for example, everybody knows that they're gay and lesbian people. This is not a new thing. The whole notion of being in the closet, well, maybe, to degrees, but the notion of sending your children into the wilderness. Oh, what's happening up here? You okay, both of you? Are they leaving? Wait a minute. Are you two staying or are you leaving? They're staying. All right. He's going to say they're going to leave me with this group. All right, whatever. The point here is, what I'm saying is, there's been an incorporation of categories of difference within African-American communities, sometimes with conflict, sometimes with consensus, but historically recognizing the necessity of being flexible around one's own views. That's a political framework, all right? Not uniform, but there it is. But also, when African-American women have had the option, flexible solidarity has also occurred through strategic coalitions with other social justice projects. So you will always find that there are African-American women working with other groups when those groups were receptive. And I could give an example of that a little later on if you're interested. But right now I want to move on. So flexible solidarity in Black feminist thought. I'm going to argue, this is my book, Black Feminist Thought. This is shamelessly putting this up here. I know. All right. This is to remind me of what I said. I need visual aids, all right? Flexible solidarity, these are the political actions that underlie Black survival politics and Black protest politics. I talked about this in the seminar a little bit, but maybe I didn't, I'm not sure. The point is we overlook this and we go immediately to intersectionality, because I think intersectionality also comes from Black feminist thought. Very much. You can see these ideas in this analysis, but we don't necessarily emphasize the political dimensions of what this particular discourse is offering us. Again, this is one discourse. There are many others. And social justice. The reason I'm talking about social justice now is, how can you continue to engage in political struggle without hope for the future? And without hope that equality is possible, and without being informed by some sense that it's all worth it. Now, you can call this whatever you like. Some people get to this place of ethical commitment through religion, and that's how a lot of Black women have gotten to that place and have found solace in religion. But I think you can find this notion of an ethics as central to one's work as being a very important dimension of Black feminist thought. Also one that I think we have not paid sufficient attention to. All right, now I'm going to pick up the pace so I don't faint on you. Let me give you an example. Flexible solidarity in action. I would encourage you to look at the example of hashtag Black Lives Matter. You can Google Black Lives Matter, and I put up here just a graphic. Is my son next? This whole notion of advocacy on one's own behalf, but advocacy on behalf of the community. And the three women at the bottom are women who brought with them an idea of intersectionality and incorporated that into the movement. So their whole point was, you can't just pick and choose which Black lives matter. All Black lives matter. And the Black lives that are prostitutes, or the Black lives that are transgendered, or the Black lives that are poor, or the Black lives that are whatever, that fall outside of a historical politics of respectability, we can no longer afford the luxury of saying some Black lives matter and the rest of them need to kind of be quiet so we can win this struggle. This is, to me, the latest iteration of a Black feminist framework that has expanded the meaning of Blackness in terms of who matters, which lives matter. And they have taken that sensibility and engaged in coalition politics around that. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. I want to call your attention to it because this is a living, breathing moment of struggle over these particular issues. So summing up, yay, we're getting near the end of part 2 here. Summing up, all right? Flexibility and political solidarity. For those of you who like those summary charts, and I love these abstractions, so you can maybe hang in there with me. Political solidarity is often thought of as uniformity. The way you get solidarity is through groupthink. We come up with a program, we choose an ideology, and we all agree to adhere to its beliefs. That's how we get solidarity. Whether it's Black power, we all have to be for Black power the same way. Or whether it's feminism, we all have to be feminists in the same way. What happens with political solidarity and uniformity is that it requires uniformity. It requires saying, you can be as different as you want, just as long as on the essential things, we are in solidarity. And I've already decided what the essential things are. So you can join our movement as long as you also agree to what I have already said is essential. Still with me? You following? You've been in this meeting, right? Sensing. But what you get is fixed hierarchy within solidarity. You get a hierarchy within solidarity that is not noticed. So for example, in a Black organization, you can get all the men thinking they should be running things and the women should be cooking and making soup or whatever, all right? And other things as well. So that form of solidarity can actually run its course and be ineffective because it's a top-down solidarity that's imposed. It's not necessarily democratically constructed, which is where I started this whole presentation earlier. Class analysis is very much like this. It's really difficult to convince the lefties, and you probably have your lefties here as well, all right, that they're not right about everything. Marx thought of everything and answered all the questions 150 years ago, and if you all just read Marx, we would have the solidarity we need. Why are you talking about gender? Why are you talking about all those identity categories and personal sexuality? Why? Well, might we in fact expand understandings of class that go beyond materialism and also look at cultural dimensions of how class functions? Would that perhaps be the beginning of an intersectional analysis that might strengthen that? Oh no, we have political solidarity now and uniformity. I'm arguing for something else, or at least I'm exploring something else with you, and you're very patiently hanging in there with me as I develop this argument, all right? I'm saying that political solidarity requires flexibility, right? And flexibility doesn't mean anything goes, but it means less rigidity. How do we develop political solidarity from the bottom up? Whatever the constituencies are who are considered on the bottom, who need to be somehow in alliance. I think one thing we might consider, rethinking political solidarity and flexibility, is to choose an ethical principle and work on its behalf. For example, we might all agree that social justice is what we all want, but we might each have a different view of how that might look and strategies for getting there. And if the principle is big enough, it can accommodate that kind of heterogeneity. That's what democracy should be, by the way, big enough to accommodate that heterogeneity without permanent hierarchy. So working on behalf of this principle requires flexibility. And I'm introducing a new term here, networking within solidarity. That's something I want to think about a bit more. So I put that in to see what you thought. But fundamentally, I'm talking about a bottom-up solidarity. And by the way, I'm talking about political action now. But of course, we could also talk about intellectual movements as well. Solidarities among different points of view, where the whole notion isn't to destroy the other one through adversarial debate, but to strengthen both through debate. Okay, let me move on. I think we're moving on to part 3. Oh, we are. We're part 3. This is going to go a lot faster because I have to lay the foundation in order for this to make sense. Or it's just a series of rules and recipes, and you go immediately to that. So I'm going to argue coalition building is where we need to think. And where we might want to end up are durable political communities that last over time. So 3 things I'll discuss. The first is recognizing common interests. The second is the idea of building strategic coalitions. And the third idea is sustaining durable political communities. So I want to cut into this sort of more abstract parts that I've introduced thus far and talk about strategies, right? To think about some strategies. So first of all, wait a minute. Is everybody okay? I need a sip of water. Think amongst yourselves for a minute. And I have to watch the edges of the stage because they don't have little boundaries or markers or anything. All right. Recognizing common interests. I started off talking about post-raciality and racism. So I'm going to work with that example a little bit. I think we're at a point now where recognizing common interests means in the US, these groups have very different histories. They've arrived at different times under different conditions. Muslims have always been there, but now there's a much more visible Muslim presence. Latinos, Latinas, Jewish and African American experiences with white supremacy are very different. Now, the tendency is to try and say, this group is better than the other group. We know who's going to be on the bottom, right? Do we know who's always on the bottom of these groups? Anyhow, what we have to recognize is the relational nature of these histories. Now, this has been a hard sell under post-raciality when everybody thinks we've arrived at the mountaintop. But I think the kinds of incidents that have occurred in the last 18 months and during our campaign in 2016 have gotten people out. I mean, this was actually a rally against white supremacy. I can't believe I saw a banner where against white supremacy. And the people who were against white supremacy, many of them were white. This is astounding, all right? But not particularly surprising, because now there's a space for thinking about these kinds of coalitions when the events themselves are so egregious, right, that are occurring. learning about intertwined histories. Remember that earlier graphic? On the left, you see the tents. When I saw this graphic that the US was actually putting children, housing them in tents like this. This is where they are on the Texas border. This is where the children went. It reminded me of Japanese internment camps. This graphic down on the bottom are the Japanese internment camps from 1942 to 1946. And the sign, another graphic popped up when I was just doing a very cursory search of this woman that says, "Japs keep moving." This is a white man's neighborhood, right? So there we've got a nice little intersectional moment of a woman, the property, the gender, excuse me, the race, the whole thing, the national unequal citizenship. And these graphics look very similar to me. The whole notion of putting people in camps of some kind, or incarceration if you want to spread it out. Not the temporary camp, but the actual incarceration of the city. So the other graphic up here, very nice for us today, is this is outraging a large segment of the American public. People are upset about this, right, for now. Now, you know that the news cycle is such that it's hard to sustain these types of interests over time. But I thought I would put that up there so we wouldn't all be too depressed about this, all right? No family separation. That's something that people feel very strongly about, because they feel strongly about their own children, so they can empathize. So this notion of identifying common interests, and sometimes what's needed to identify common interests is a catalyst, something that gets through your defenses, where you can't ignore it, you can't unthink it, you can't unsee it, you can't unhear it. It's there. And I think the types of images that we have of these children taken from their families has reached people. Now, these are the same people who are not bothered at all, or appear to be bothered at all, by things that are happening to other groups of children, which we can talk about if you're interested. So learning about these intertwined histories and family separation, I'm going to work with family separation for a minute, all right? And broaden this out a bit more, because on the left, we have Latino family separation, the US border, June 2018. And on the right, we have the legacy of Black activism. These are the mothers of incarcerated and murdered Black youth, also in 2018, still going on. And we have a graphic of the auction block. Now, when I was taken on my Rio tour by some of the Black Afro-Brazilian students, I believe I got to visit a site here in Rio where you had your auction block. This is the American graphic. I don't know what yours looks like, but look at this. Put this in your mind as an image. Google it. Take a better look at it when you get home. Because what you're looking at is family separation. This woman is carrying a baby, right? There is her partner. She's up on the auction block, which looks this particular way in this particular graphic. There's a man on the left who's casually just looking at this like entertainment. This happens a lot today in terms of how we consume popular culture. Some people may just consume family separation that way. They look at those babies and they say, oh, wow, well, you know, that's not my baby, whatever they say. And here we have other people actively selling this issue. This is the embodied nature of family separation. And it's race, and it's gender, and it's class, and it's profoundly intersectional right in that one graphic. So being at a point where we can say, what are the common issues that have been approached or experienced differently? This is the kind of thing I have in mind. I'm not looking for like, oh yeah, you know, I got a common issue with you. I'm not looking for that, you know, like a party thing. I think this is serious study about intertwined histories, selecting ideas that matter now, and we'll probably find out that they matter to a lot of people, and we'll learn a lot. That's the basis of the kind of political solidarity that is needed, not the top-down stuff quite yet. The second, oh, wait a minute here. Why are you up there like that? Hold it. Oh, no, that's it. This is number 2. Sorry about that. Building strategic coalitions. Now, I'm losing steam up here, people. Okay, let me talk to myself for a minute. Self, get it together now. Get it together. You are Puku. Where am I? Puki. You are in Brazil. You are in Rio. This is 2018. You can do this. Okay. Hi. Usually I have to do that to myself, but I thought I would have you join in there. All right. Because as you can tell, when you're working with material like this, it's exhausting. It's intellectually exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting. All right. So occasionally I just have to stop and take care of myself. So that was my little moment. I'm back. All right. Now I want to move on to the second thing, which is strategic coalitions. And this is the whole notion of not only just recognizing you have common interests, but doing something about that. Reaching across categories. So it's not just a race thing, or it's not just a child thing, or it's not just a gender thing. It's something else. The U.S., very interesting thing that's going on around the dreamers. I mentioned earlier the American dream and what the American dream is, right? Very briefly. The dreamers are children, and again, we're talking Latino children, right? This is the argument, children of color, right? Who were brought to the U.S. by their parents. The parents were often did not have citizenship, so they were illegal, and the children were illegal. But what often happened in a dreamer family, in this kind of family, is that some people had American citizenship and others did not. And many of these children did not know that they didn't have citizenship. They had siblings who were born in the US who were citizens. And it was a surprise to them to reach adulthood, usually when graduating from high school, and coming to find out that they were, quote, illegals. So they decided not to, quote, stay in the shadows. They're called the Dreamers. And there was an act, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. This was under the Obama administration, to see if one could find a pathway to citizenship for this population. Well, the pathway has been shut down. The pathway is now on hold. It's a big political issue right now in the US. But what's interesting to me about this particular example is that all of the people who now have sort of are in coalition, the potential coalition, groups that normally would not be working together. Latinos, Latinas, youth, LGBTQ youth, religious institutions have weighed in and begun to take a position on this. Colleges, very strong in terms of we want these students to go to our colleges. We will help them as best we can. And corporations that realize this is a highly trained group of American, not citizens, but people who are fully American and yet are not allowed to use their full potential. So we've got some really interesting potential here for coalitions. Now, I was not naive. You know, I don't assume that because you see a common interest, you actually get a coalition. But I think what we have are some very interesting moments for that possibility. So I want to introduce an idea to you. It's going to link this flexible solidarity and strategic coalitions. So all you remember are these two things. On one side, coalitions of convenience. And these coalitions may be useful. You come together around an issue. It's convenient. It works. It's strategic. But it doesn't necessarily have to be long-lasting. I'm not saying that a coalition of convenience is a lesser form of coalition. I'm saying it's a strategy. It might be a starting place. It might be an ending place. But just to mention what I mean by coalitions of convenience. They're efficient, they're expedient, they're chosen. They're for specific issues. Many of the issues that I've mentioned tonight could be coalitions of convenience. Very good starting points for that. They're often short-term and contingent. They're not expected to last forever. Things like, oh, well, I don't know. We can come back to that. Ethics may or may not be central. We don't have to share the same ethics. We have a coalition to get something done. Okay. And they're politically strategic. That's what they are. But on the other side, we've got coalitions of conscience. These, I think, are a bit more long-lasting. They're often seen as necessary. If you don't survive, if I don't survive, you won't survive. We must do this together. We have to do it together. Identities of similar and or shared histories. This is something that's quite deep. It isn't just an issue. This is where the identities matter. This is where you can't just walk away from people. They're long-term. They involve cultural continuities and memory. This is the notion, for example, of African Americans, a long-term political commitment. Shared ethics and vision, freedom, equity, social justice, and durable political communities. Over time, these kinds of coalitions of conscience can become very different kinds of communities. So the notion of durable political communities is where I want to finish up. I've talked about recognizing common interests of interdependent and intertwining histories. I've talked about building strategic coalitions of convenience and conscience. And now I want to finish with this whole aspirational idea, which is kind of back to the beginning again. Sustaining durable political communities. I'm back to black women again. How did I end up back to these black women? I thought we moved on from the black women. Why is she back at those black women again? Why can't she talk about some other women? All right. I said, this is my area of expertise. So you just have to live with it, all right? And what I would argue here is that black women face the existential question of precarious black life. All right. One's own life, the life of one's loved ones, the life of one's children, the precarity of life in the past, and the potential that life may not be safe in the future. It's a durable struggle. It's a durable community. Without a durable community, it's very difficult to survive. So this notion of coalition is one way to think about this, but I think this gives us something to aspire to. And I'm using the term community both as a metaphor, an idea, and a set of practices or praxis. This idea of durable political community is aspirational because I think there's been a fundamental impetus toward democratic equity and fairness. Communities haven't been that fair, but I think people recognize that's where they want to go, and pragmatic. Not just sitting around and imagining a better future, but how do you work for it? Every day, whether as a student, do you write a paper that studies something that hasn't been studied before, or what? Flexible solidarity is required for building these durable Black communities. And I want to finish with a graphic. Sustaining durable Black communities, because I think what we're doing is now we're at a very interesting moment around this whole notion of durable political communities and how intersectionality really speaks to this idea of this particular dimension of political solidarity. I put a graphic up here. If you're not familiar with this book, it's called The Book of Negroes. Got a kind of funny title. I don't know what that would be in Portuguese. Good luck to my translators back there. All right. I believe this was 2003, even though I just discovered it fairly recently. One would not think, if this is translated or not, this is a book of fiction. And what this fiction allows you to do is feel what it was like for this one woman to begin in Africa, to be sold into captivity into the US, to be able to escape to Canada, but that wasn't freedom either, to go to England to argue the case against captivity and slavery. And it really is a book that has a Black woman protagonist who is speaking for herself. There's no external narrator. It's talking about family separation and reunification. That's a theme that I mentioned tonight, which I think is quite significant to a lot of people. It talks about captivity, slavery, and emancipation. It's hopeful, but it doesn't run away from the problems that we face today. And fundamentally, it affirms Black humanity. It affirms Black life. So to me, it may seem like I've gotten pretty far away from my topic. Intersectionality, social justice, and political solidarity. But in many ways, we're back where we started. The contradiction between a democratic ideal and what it will take to get there is where we've gone tonight. Okay? You have been on a tough journey. The end. And you did it in translation. Can we clap for these translators a little bit?
Eu queria registrar a contribuição do Departamento de Letras, nossas duas intérpretes, né? Elas são alunas do Departamento de Letras, e então é mais uma conexão da universidade que faz que possibilita que a gente faça um evento desse. Clara e Márcia, obrigada, né? Bom, agora podemos passar para perguntas, né? Nós temos aqui mais uma meia hora, 40 minutos, depois nós temos que esvaziar a sala, e eu queria, a gente vai... Patricia, would you like to answer one by one? Or? Você quer... Vou traduzir. Você quer que... Okay. Would you like to answer one by one? Então, vamos fazer uma a uma, tá? E aproveita, a gente pode pedir só que seja pergunta rápida e que vocês se apresentem, por favor. Tá?
Boa noite, eu sou o Jorge, sou estudante aqui de Direito. Eu acho que quando a gente participa desse tipo de evento, a gente acaba, às vezes, tendo uma participação muito institucional. E a gente, às vezes, não coloca alguns aspectos pessoais da nossa vida, mas que acho que faz muito parte da forma como a gente compreende esse tipo de situação. Por exemplo, quando o nosso irmão começou cantando um rap, eu me identifiquei muito, porque é um pouco a história da minha vida. Não só da briga o tempo todo para minha mãe parar de fumar, mas todas as questões sociais envolvidas nisso. Meu pai já está morto, a relação da situação de pobreza, minha mãe sofreu violência doméstica, várias questões que fazem com que a gente tenha uma percepção específica do mundo, da vida. E para mim é muito difícil discutir algumas questões políticas com a minha mãe. É muito difícil discutir com ela, por exemplo, racismo. É muito difícil discutir com ela algumas opressões. Eu lembro que a última vez que eu fui discutir racismo com ela, eu comecei a falar de escravidão, ela parou a conversa na hora e falou: você só fala de passado. Eu não quero falar de passado, e enfim. Depois disso, a gente não consegue mais conversar sobre esse assunto. E hoje, especificamente... Desculpa. Ah, tá, foi mal. E hoje, especificamente, assim, eu tenho uma ligação muito forte com criança, eu quero ser pai, eu estudo muito esse processo. E hoje eu tive uma crise de choro por conta dessa situação lá dos Estados Unidos, das crianças. E em algum momento minha mãe veio me perguntar o que aconteceu, eu expliquei para ela, e daqui a pouco ela estava chorando também. E aí isso me faz refletir que dentro dessas questões que a gente está trabalhando, para além das questões setoriais, o que é fundamental nesse aspecto todo, que eu acho que é mais universal do que qualquer coisa, é o sofrimento. A gente, às vezes, tem dificuldade em encontrar o que nos une no positivo. Mas no negativo é o sofrimento. É o sofrimento que, se a gente pensar, por exemplo, no aspecto do racismo, no caso do Brasil, faz com que um jovem negro tenha 3 vezes mais de chance de ser assassinado do que um branco, mas é o mesmo racismo que faz com que a Beyoncé, numa situação específica, seja vítima de racismo. É o mesmo tipo de discriminação que, se a gente para pensar nas questões de gênero, a gente vai ter mulheres pobres em situação absurdamente sofrendo opressão, mas que, se a gente for pensar, algumas artistas famosas sofrendo violência doméstica também. Então, nesse sentido, eu acho que assim, a pergunta fundamental que a gente tem que sair não só daqui, mas para a vida, para tudo que a gente faz, é nesse contexto que nos une. E aí o que eu acho que é importante a gente pensar nisso também é o aspecto do privilégio. Que a gente está sempre falando das opressões na lógica do oprimido que sofre. Mas se a gente não discute o privilégio, a gente deixa de discutir o principal, que é o opressor. Então a gente fala do pobre, mas a gente deixa de discutir que, por exemplo, no Brasil, 6 pessoas reúnem a riqueza de metade da população mais pobre. Então isso, para mim, eu acho que é fundamental no sentido da gente conseguir chegar, de fato, a quem contribui mais para esse estado de caos e de barbárie que a gente vive. Eu queria te fazer 2 perguntas, Patrícia. Primeiro, agradecer muito sua contribuição. É bem rápido. A primeira é que eu não vi você mencionar... A primeira é que eu não vi você mencionar direitos humanos nas suas colocações. Então, eu queria entender como que você entende essa correlação. E a segunda é que eu também vi você falar pouco sobre o capitalismo. Então, o que você pensa? A gente precisa humanizar mais o capitalismo dentro desses estándares que você apresentou, ou tem que pensar numa coisa nova?
You have said so much in there that I can just pick anything I feel like answering. So I can start with what you said at the beginning, which is the whole notion of the past and how you're not supposed to talk about the past, because that's quite significant in talking about capitalism and in talking about human rights. Because that is the past in the present. That's how I look at it. We're always rewriting the present, rewriting the past, so it fits what we want to see in the present. So people who say ignore the past, they're comfortable with that situation. They're running away from something that they don't want to deal with. For me, it's a question of pulling that together. And also your second question in the middle, you were talking about suffering. You're talking about the things that we can see. And I think most of us can see the suffering. That's where I started, the whole notion of analyzing the suffering. But I came at it through analyzing systems of power. What I want to do is analyze or begin to see where the change has occurred, right? I think to not just imagine it's out there somewhere, but structurally, where do you see people who do something about suffering, their own suffering as individuals, collectively around suffering? But I don't even know if I put it that way. I think most people have a lot more joy in their life than we think they do. Even among groups that are very downtrodden, there is joy and beauty and art and singing. Because you're in law school, you're not looking for those things. I'm assuming, you know, and I'm in the academy doing social theory, so I'm up here stuck with Marx and capitalism, you know, for example. But when you start looking to basically young people in particular, in terms of how they craft their lives, they're not necessarily looking at the boundaries that we see. They know things are unfair. They know they don't have money. They know there are problems around them. But there's something about the spirit of many young people who say, we can be creative with very little and find ways to define ourselves, right? To me, I look at, for example, hip hop. I mean, hip hop really came out of New York. I mean, that's not just New York, but kids on the street of New York whose schools had basically taken away all the programs that they wanted. No more music classes, no more this. Schools sucked. No instruments. And what did they do? They used their bodies to create that. They used music and sound and spoken word. They found ways to be creative with what they had and with one another. And you can't tell me that doesn't happen a lot of different places. We often just don't know about it because, number one, people want to keep that hidden because it's a source of power. I mean, I liken it to the enslaved African Americans who would sneak off into the woods at the middle of the night and have these types of moments of beauty, sandwiched in between extremely difficult lives during the day. So in Black culture in the US, there's daytime, but then there's when the white day is done. That's an expression, right? When the light goes down, then things can change. So I'm not glorifying this at all. I'm really encouraging us to try and see beyond the suffering to see the humanity and to ask where is the creativity in that situation. And that also has implications for the future, right? Now, this whole discussion of human rights, now I don't know you do human rights here. This is the question I never got back to, by the way. So there's one more day, any of you who want to school me in sort of the view of human rights here. But I would think it's beyond rights, right? I'm talking about something that isn't just rights, because rights are important and fundamental. But you can have rights, but nobody pays attention to them, right? Without that infrastructure, it's really difficult to claim equality and those kinds of things. But as I said earlier, how do you put teeth into human rights? How do you put teeth into human? Right? I didn't talk at all about some people are considered better categories of human than others. So the language that we use is always going to be imperfect, but it's what we have. But I would hope that what comes out of this talk perhaps for you is that to never see anything as fixed. This is not a top down, it's fixed, it's finished. Those 6 families forever will run Brazil. Maybe not. Maybe there will be no more Brazil. I know this is a horrible idea for you all, but we have to think outside of the box. If you think about long arc of history, Brazil wasn't always here. We weren't here. It was something totally different. Occasionally I think that when I'm in a very beautiful place like this, and I try and imagine it without all the buildings. What was it like when the first people from outside came and encountered the people who were already here? What was that experience like? Just because we have a really powerful built environment doesn't mean it's going to last. I would encourage you to look to the work of Octavia Butler, who writes, science fiction would be one way of calling it, but she's got this book called The Parable of the Sowers. And this is a book about privatization and all these bars that are here in Rio to keep people separated from one another and safe. And when that whole society disintegrates, and when you get chaos and you have to do something different, and what comes out of that. So our artists are doing a very interesting job of helping us imagine these things if we look to them. Okay?
Boa noite. Eu vou falar em português, tudo bem? Eu estou fazendo uma oficina com uma artista do Recife, a Ana Lira. Está aqui. Ah, ela está ali, ó. E...
Where is she? Put your hand up.
She's there.
Put your hand
Right
you.
there.
Put your hand up.
E aí, numa das aulas, ela levantou uma questão que eu acho que tem um diálogo direto com uma das duas dificuldades que você colocou, que é a falta de um léxico, né? De palavras para a gente analisar o racismo contemporâneo, enfim, todas as questões de minorias, né? E aí o exemplo que ela trouxe para a gente foi de que o governo Temer usou uma frase que era: se você é contra o privilégio, que é uma frase que envolve todos os movimentos minoritários, principalmente, pelo menos aqui no Brasil, né? Se você é contra o privilégio, você é a favor da reforma previdenciária. Como que a gente lida com as palavras e com o léxico que a gente constrói para analisar as nossas questões contemporâneas, se elas podem o tempo todo ser esvaziadas e colocadas contra o que a gente quer construir? Como a gente lida com essa volatilidade do significado da palavra, né? Assim.
By seeing it coming. If you know that's what's happening, I want to speak to something else too that you also brought up. But I think the notion of boxing yourself in, and I think this is being boxed in. If you're against privilege, then you're all together. I mean, it's a way of really dumbing down the whole argument such that you don't see the complexity of the argument itself. I don't see privilege as an absolute. I see privilege as operating on many levels. I see all of us as privileged and perhaps penalized in some ways. Now, granted, there are people who really have a convergence of intense issues that go along with these systems, right? I will say that. But for example, among the so-called privileged, you see gender differences where this issue of domestic violence, it's not that it's just a general issue. It takes specific forms among the privileged if we're talking about class privilege, right, particularly. If we begin to look at ourselves, and it's not a question of us and them, it's a question of us and connections to them, not just us and opposition to them, but connections to them. There has to be space for people who are privileged, especially in a school like this, to move beyond denial, to move beyond resistance, to try and shut down other points of view, to say, I need to see the connections of race and class and gender, how I as a citizen am privileged under the rules of Brazil by either money or by the category that I'm in, or by color, or by gender, or by sexuality. And we're all asking ourselves that question. But that doesn't mean that the answers are the same. It's not a moral equivalency. So this whole notion of privilege, I think, I tend to look at something called a both and frame. You can be both privileged and suffer without us seeing the suffering, right? You can be suffering, but there may be what would be considered forms of privilege and freedom within the suffering. So, for example, how nice it is not to have to succumb to gender norms, right? You may be discriminated against in some settings, but it's something to have a site of freedom where you know who you are and you can claim yourself, regardless of your economic circumstances. So intersectionality is being developed. It is evolving. It is not a finished thing. And really seeing which aspects of this framework speak to these kinds of questions, I don't have a definitive answer for you. But what I can do is muddy your question a little bit and perhaps point to some places of people who can help us think about those things. You claimed art. I think artists are often ahead of the rest of us in thinking about these complexities. I want more complex questions. I don't want the march where it's either or. Up with privilege, down with whatever. You might think of many ways to, shall we say, subvert those 6 families other than confronting them. You never know what's going to work. Okay.
Oi, boa noite. Eu sou Camila Daniel, sou professora da Universidade Federal Rural do Rio de Janeiro. E a minha pergunta é se você observou entre as organizações de mulheres negras com as quais você vem trabalhando o uso da categoria People of Color, pessoa de cor, como uma forma de construir essa solidariedade, reconhecendo a raça, mas reconhecendo as especificidades, por exemplo, de latinos e negros. E aí eu faço essa pergunta porque ela é bem importante para mim, porque em 2016 eu morei em Baltimore, e Baltimore, como você sabe, é uma cidade negra, e eu particularmente não me encaixava em categoria nenhuma. Eu sou negra, mas não sou African American, mas eu sou latina, mas sou negra, e me viam como African American. E o único espaço em que eu consegui me encontrar política, social e emocionalmente foi nos espaços em que a ação política se construía a partir dessa categoria People of Color, que inclusive ela é muito criticada no Brasil pelos nossos motivos aqui, que é usado com outros propósitos. Então eu gostaria de saber se você encontrou o uso, e em geral eu via o uso do People of Color sendo reivindicado principalmente por latinos, e aí eventualmente alguns African Americans entravam nesses grupos, mas eu gostaria de saber se você encontrou isso em algum caso.
I love this question. Because for me, the term people of color has been a moving target. Initially, I think it was a bureaucratic term. Colleges and universities were tired of hearing about all these others. They didn't want to do, in colleges and universities, they didn't want to do the work of the specific histories that I'm arguing for here. So people of color became a convenient term for those 2 students who were Latino, or 2 students who were Black, 3 students who were indigenous. You know, it really was a way in some ways of hiding and sort of flattening and homogenizing race and racism by making it just an issue of color. That was really convenient for schools because what they were able to do was substitute one person of color was just as good as another person of color. So what I was able to witness was the substitution of working class African American kids from Baltimore, for example, with middle class African American kids or international kids or affluent Latino kids. So you got so far away from the initial impetus for institutional transformation that you had this group of people of color who were just trying to figure out what they had in common. And it wasn't even something they were seeking, right? It was something that they encountered in their institution. What I think has happened, and by the way, there are no census categories in the US, people of color. There's no color category, right? So we look at the census to really map these histories, those types of identities, and how they are attached to institutional structures. Government structures is important, but I just throw that in there because I think that's important. You may think you're defining yourself all you want, the way you want to do it, but there are consequences for these categories, whether somebody's Black, Latino, Muslim, etc. What I think is happening now is I think that that many groups are claiming this category people of color. It's a politicized category much more than it used to be. So for some people, it is meaningful to say people of color, and they have done the work to see the connections among their group and another group. Or they're people who've said, I don't belong in any one group. So this coalition of color can accommodate the different groups and people who don't fit pristinely into any one group. So it really speaks to the moment of coalitional politics. But the danger, not so much the danger, but it's evolving. I'm not particularly comfortable with that yet, because I've seen how that has been deployed to shut down either radical or progressive thought. Okay, so I think you put your finger on a moving target. Something like Black Lives Matter, saying our movement is not people of color's lives matter, because that's like too many words and it's not meaningful, right? But something like Black Lives Matter, and then looking at all the things that fit under that category Black, creates space. So we're in a moment now where if Black's not in people of color, I'm not interested, okay? If people of color there are institutions. I have a student who studied mixed race in California, and that was a really interesting set of issues too. The whole people who say we are mixed race, but we don't want to be people of color. Well, I don't even know where to go with this. You know, we're really, I'm just letting you know that there's so many things that are emerging, and that it's just a moment. When I talk about this being a moment of a turning point, or this is a shift, and trying to figure it out, sociologists, we're in the moment. So we're just stuck with this never knowing, whereas the historians are they have it so easy. They can look back and they can say we may get it right or wrong, but we at least know it's not happening now. All right. So I don't know what will happen to this term. I have a feeling it's going to get more legs and be more robust, because it does give the space for the kind of alliances I'm talking about. Although I don't know if Indigenous people would want to be people of color. Okay, so it does have boundary issues around color. And then it goes the other way. We all have color. White is a color. So, I've heard that. So what that does is that trivializes the category itself, which is why I really talk about specific histories and worldviews, epistemology, intertwining. I mean, grounding this stuff in something tangible, and not just creating a category out of the air because it seems to fit the current moment, is that's the challenge of it all. So that's why I love that question. Thank you. Oh, it's going to be hard. We know each other, so yeah. So I'm afraid of her because she's very, very, yeah. She's okay.
Eu vou botar no meu currículo lá. Sorry. Bom, boa noite. Eu sou Giovana Xavier, sou professora na UFRJ da disciplina Intelectuais Negras. Patrícia, eu quero te perguntar, na verdade, é uma inquietação mesmo de pensar um pouco da história do conceito de interseccionalidade no campo, né? Eu lembro que estava no início do doutorado quando eu li a primeira edição do seu livro, que é que eu tenho aqui, que eu trouxe para você autografar, obviamente, é outra já. E quando eu comecei a falar em interseccionalidade lá atrás, eu lembro que uma coisa que acontecia, que para mim hoje é muito emblemática, era que as pessoas ficavam rindo, e porque a palavra é muito longa, interseccionalidade, eu não sei falar o que é isso não, e eu estou fazendo uma história, sei lá, de 13 anos para cá, né? Nesses últimos 13 anos, estou pensando muito em como operar com centro e margem simultaneamente. A gente tem visto uma incorporação do conceito de interseccionalidade no mainstream dos estudos feministas. E, ao mesmo tempo, quando esse conceito é incorporado a essa ideia universal de estudos feministas, não é simultâneo o reconhecimento da primazia da autoria do conceito, que é de feministas negras, né? Então, eu queria te ouvir um pouco nesse sentido, não de individualizações ou culpabilizações, mas como que a história da incorporação do conceito de interseccionalidade a um campo supostamente mais universal dos estudos feministas tem também produzido processos de apagamento da autoria e da produção científica de mulheres negras que se refletem no mercado editorial, que se refletem na distribuição de recursos nas universidades, na aprovação e reprovação de artigos em revistas científicas, enfim, um pouco tudo isso. Obrigada. Os projetos.
This is exactly the danger that faces all knowledge that starts off being highly critical. Critical for people in terms of living their lives and critical of existing conditions. I have been keeping an eye on how intersectionality has traveled. That's the metaphor that I've been using. When it travels out of one setting and travels into another setting, the setting that you've identified is the setting of knowledge production in the academy that values theoretical ideas and assumes that no Black people thought those things. So basically, it's erasing the actual authors of those ideas to make them acceptable. Now, there are women in feminism who actually think this is a good thing for intersectionality. It's too closely associated with, quote, women of color. And if those women of color were taken out, it could really be a universal theory like others. I think that would actually kill the soul of intersectionality itself. I think we also have to pay attention, a couple things here. We've got to pay attention to the fact that intersectionality has often become a substitute for other more radical traditions. So, for example, there are people, and feminists do this, I don't want to blame just the feminists, but it's a good example of this. You know, people who say, well, I'm doing intersectional work and it has race in it because it's intersectional. But they don't know anything about racism. So it's a way to actually make your work seem more legitimate in certain ways than it actually is. And the same thing, I'm doing intersectionality and I know all this stuff about race, but I'm not paying attention to sexuality, even though there's a whole history of people who've been studying sexuality and sexual politics associated with that. So in some ways, what you're describing is the depoliticization of intersectionality by its travel into the academy. The talk I gave tonight was in the academy, but it wasn't about the academy. You may have noticed that, just a little aside here, because we spend a lot of time thinking about how to get things to fit into the academy. What the academy does, what a lot of faculty members do, is they appropriate other people's knowledge without attribution, and they build careers on that. Why would we expect intersectionality to be any different? The issue is to guard against that and to decide not so much who owns it, because that's the whole notion of knowledge as a commodity, but basically how do we manage that because we see it coming. This to me is the advantage of having been at this for a while and being able to trace how ideas have shifted and changed. So this time around, I'm paying attention to intersectionality. When it no longer serves its purpose, when we can't, first of all, misconception, intersectionality is not just a discourse of oppressed people, all right? It is all about privilege. It's about the relationship between privilege and oppression. That's what racism is about as a history. That's what feminism has been all about as a history. So when you get something that appears to not be doing that, but it's doing something else, then we're moving into another terrain. The seminar that I taught here last week with these wonderful students, I should make you stand up and raise your hands. We talked, I mentioned in one of the sessions the depoliticization by moving from racism to race, from sexism to gender, to capitalism to class. That's a real drop right there. So that if you have these signifiers of race and class and gender that float around, you can do whatever you want with those terms because they are no longer affiliated with systems of power. So there are all these strategies that are being used to change intersectionality in the academy. The good news, however, is there are a lot of people who are onto this, and they're publishing about this very issue. So it's not like everyone's saying, come steal our stuff and make money off of it. It's more, we see this coming. How do we actually claim the space of the academy to legitimate the ideas that are actually there? Now, that's what I did tonight. I claimed the podium for that. You can do this too, okay? It's not just a question of waiting for the shoe to fall. Claim the space. Depends on the kind of work that you do. So you mentioned this initially in terms of Black intellectual tradition, and that's really how I enter all of this, because there's a long history of really good, smart Black people who've been critical, just never show up. All right, their ideas may live on, but their names begin to disappear. For example, how many of you know the phrase, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house? It becomes a slogan that is circulated. You may know Audre Lorde said that because it's on a poster somewhere. But if you go back and read the original article as to where that particular phrase came from and how it is situated, I mean, it reads a little differently in terms of who she's talking to and what she's saying. So we have to do our homework around all of this. We particularly have to do our homework around intersectionality. I mean, these ideas came from very radical, this current articulation of these ideas. I think the ideas are much older than the modern period. But the modern articulation of these ideas really was quite much more clear, concise, and powerful than what we're getting. We're getting watered down intersectionality. We're getting people, I'm using an intersectional framework. That kind of thing. We're getting people who never read Kimberly Crenshaw. They read one article that Kimberly Crenshaw wrote years ago. And then this term coining, I even heard you say it in the Portuguese. I heard that. Did you use it? Because, even though it didn't, because the people who just basically identify the value of Kimberly Crenshaw's work with intersectionality is she made up the term. So now we can just take the term and do with it what we want and not read her work ever again, when what she does is much more substantive than that. So there's just a lot to be done, and that's just the academy. See, I'm really trying to look at these ideas and their utility beyond the academy. So we don't elevate our own selves as being far more important than we actually are. Now, this is the belly of the beast. Make no mistake, ideas matter. You're in the belly of the beast. It's a good thing to be here and recognize that, and there are things you can do within the belly of the beast that you cannot do outside. But there are other things that can happen outside that do not have to happen here. So I'm answering like 5 questions that you didn't ask, but that's all right. I have the mic.
Eu imagino que haja muitas perguntas a serem feitas ainda. Mas a gente vai ter um coquetel assim que acabar aqui. Estão todos e todas convidados. Vai ser aqui dentro do campus mesmo, no restaurante gourmet. Vamos seguindo o fluxo que vamos achar, ok? E lá vocês terão oportunidade, alguns que conseguirem, a briga vai ser boa, né? De colocarem outras perguntas à Patricia. Eu queria, antes da Ângela fechar a nossa comemoração de hoje e a presença da Patricia, agradecer a Patricia publicamente por nos oferecer uma forma muito potente e, ao mesmo tempo, muito generosa de discutir hierarquias de humanidade que nos constituíram e de demonstrar o quanto essas hierarquias de humanidade produziram pactos políticos muito frágeis entre nós, né? Pactos políticos que tentaram se produzir dentro de uma lógica democrática, mas que ainda nessa lógica democrática se acumpliciaram com essas mesmas hierarquias de humanidade, em muitos campos e em muitos fatores. Queria agradecer a Patrícia por nos oferecer uma forma de pensar tensões raciais, tensões políticas, em relação, trazendo o contexto estadunidense, mas permitindo que a gente não reproduza, através da sua análise, um movimento muito comum no Brasil, que é o movimento de tomar essas perspectivas como forma de harmonizar essas tensões, como forma de mitigar essas violências, né? Então, ela nos oferece um passo a passo, né, um caminho, uma trajetória de análise que nos permite, ao invés de promover essa captura rápida, confortável, né, que a gente costuma fazer, né, exatamente o movimento inverso. O movimento de construir em cima dessas tensões as respostas, né, para o legado de racismo que a gente enfrenta. Queria agradecer a Patrícia por colocar esse conceito, e aí tem uma relação direta com a pergunta que a Giovana acabou de fazer, por colocar o conceito de interseccionalidade em cima das práticas políticas que o forjaram, né? Trazer para a gente, de novo, né, um pouco dessas lutas que foram produzidas de maneira interseccional e que possibilitaram que a gente tivesse sobrevivido até esse momento. Não é uma invenção epistêmica, mas é uma construção política e epistêmica, né, de uma forma de lutar por liberdade e manter-nos, né, vivos e não mortos em vida, que se deu de forma interseccional. E, com isso, colocar em negrito, né, um projeto de autoinscrição sobre os desafios que nos acometem, que, se de um lado ela nos brinda com uma série de referências, né, que elas nos trouxe em relação a isso, a gente tenha tantas outras a referendar e a fazer deferência nesse momento. Quando ela resgata esse legado político dessa construção de uma prática efetivamente política interseccional, a gente tem, na mesma toada, no mesmo tom e na mesma direção, a voz de Guerreiro Ramos, de Virgínia Bicudo, de Abdias Nascimento, de Lélia Gonzalez, de Eduardo de Oliveira, de Beatriz Nascimento, de Dora Bertulho, de Luísa Bairros, Soli Carneiro, Cida Bento, Edson Cardoso, Jurema Werneck, Lúcia Xavier, Mãe Beata de Manjá, Azuilda Trindade, Conceição Evaristo, Rosália Lemos, Carmen Luz, Cláudia Pões, Joselina da Silva, e a lista é ainda mais extensa, e é do tamanho da nossa luta permanente por liberdade, e permanentemente renovada, porque o racismo se renova permanentemente. São propostas como a que a Patrícia traz para a gente, e que é esse legado, essa história bonita que a gente tem para colocar para fora, né, nos oferece, é que é possível a gente imaginar como possível essas propostas efetivas de coalizões de consciência que Patrícia nos falou, né? A gente tem em todo esse repertório teórico-político, né, que eu brevemente destaquei alguns nomes, e certamente há muitos outros tão importantes quantos, que a gente produziu articulações quilombistas, né? A gente produziu articulações que são capazes não apenas de responder a pontos comuns, né, de respostas a opressões por parte da comunidade negra no Brasil, mas, né, por todos aqueles e aquelas que, ou por terem sido diretamente e desproporcionalmente afetados por essas hierarquias de humanidade, reconhecem nessa luta comum por liberdade esse ponto, né? Ou porque tem também um interesse em construir um lugar onde a liberdade seja possível para todas as formas de ser e estar no mundo e na natureza. Então, eu queria agradecer muito, muito a Patrícia e passar para...
One more thing. When you mentioned that long list of names, every single one of those names should be a dissertation. You have to write that history. You've got to recreate that history, connect it. And I just want to say that because colleges and universities are sites of intellectual activism. So by choosing what to study, what to write, what to value with your time, that really is very important. So it's not that nothing has happened. All of that has happened. And each person can do part of that. Can you imagine the next generation, the legacy you give to them? If you do that work now, when you can, there may be people who want to obstruct you in doing that, the earlier comment. But you'd be surprised what you can do if you just do it. Nike.
Bom, depois que da Tula, não posso, eu queria só agradecer. Nós não temos mais tempo, nossas intérpretes estão exaustas, né? E todos, a Tula que anunciou o coquetel, agora ninguém quer ouvir mais nada. Então, eu só queria, em nome, esse é um projeto muito exitoso, né? A vinda da Patrícia é um projeto do Fulbright Specialist, que foi a terceira edição, a terceira e última edição, né? Nós tivemos o Alden Morris no ano passado, né? Tivemos o George Eudes há 2 anos atrás, e agora fechamos com uma chave de ouro, com uma contribuição tão importante, uma intelectual de tanta envergadura como é a Patricia Collins. Só queria agradecer muito a sua participação durante 2 semanas, né?
Patricia, nice to meet you. It's a pleasure. Brian, please. Brian, please. Brian, only to kiss you. Now he's in England now. He'll come next time. He'll come here. We are going to do a workshop in Favela Santa Marta.
Gente, vamos tentar juntar aqui, que a gente vai tentar fazer uma selfie de lá para cá, entendeu? Junta aí, geração selfie, todo mundo. Aperta aqui nesse... Isso. Que aí a gente vai virar, entendeu? Garotada boa. Junta, aperta aqui, gente. Aperta, não precisa mais cadeira agora. Ninguém vai sentar, aperta mais um pouquinho, por favor. Fica aí de frente. Junta o povo, gente. Junta aqui, gente, para o negócio de um abraço, o negócio de uma foto coletiva.
Toma, vai fazer. Você vai? Eu vou simplificar.
Vem, Patricia. Gente, deixa a Patrícia passar para a foto, por favor, gente. Vem, Ângela, vem, Padre Álvaro, por favor, vem, Daniela.
Não, eu tô em espírito. Tem que vir mais pra cá. Nossa, a Patrícia tá ali, gente. Como é que tá? Ah, meu Deus. Agora em movimento. Mais uma. Está sem armazenamento suficiente. Essa ficou boa. É 1, 2, 3 e... Aê! Quer ver se eu não trabalho? Opa, mas é outra!
Não tem não, mas como ele.
Vá, força, força. Deixa eu devolver que você é da tua. Não, era IAC. Ah, tá. IAC. Na minha época era IAC. Ah, eu vi que
Eu tô só com o meu 8 horas, a gente ficou bebendo. 15 para 5 e mesmo para 10. A gente estava acontecendo.
Tem jeito não. A gente vai ver a oportunidade.
Só uma pergunta que eu não quero falar. Estou tomando antibiótico.
Ela não abriu esse espaço.
Yeah.